Discrimination against women remained a constant that violated the principles of equality and respect for human dignity and profoundly influenced the development of Mexican society. In order to understand the role of women in Mexican economy, the maquiladora industry must be explained. After the suspension of the Bracero program, whose aim was to attract Mexican workforce to factories settled in the U.S., the unemployment rate in the Mexican frontier reached a peak. As a solution, in 1965, the Border Industrialization Program was established. This program consisted in importing the raw materials to Mexico from the United States, exempt from paying duty taxes. Once the products were finished, this program obliged to re-export them to the U.S. Even if the purpose of the BIP was to finish with unemployment, American companies looked for cheap workforce. Along with the North American Free Trade Agreement, the IMEX was established as a way to strengthen the Mexican exportation sector. As mentioned before, one of the results of this economic agreement is the manufacture of goods at lower cost. Nevertheless, this reduction of production costs is a consequence of the exploitation of workforce. The use of women in Mexican society is still repressed. Thus, the percentage of women working in the maquiladora industry is higher than men's. Women don't dare complain because they fear reprisal, says Francisca Sierra Lopez, a government social worker in Mexicali. In other words, women complain less about lower wages, the long hours and harsh working conditions. A report of the UN let us know what some experts as Mrs. Rede find from the maquiladora industry. Women in that sector suffered spontaneous miscarriages as a result of working long hours and were then prosecuted for having brought about abortions. Furthermore, the NGO Human Rights Watch provides some testimonies based on interview with women from maquiladoras in the states of Baja California, Chihuahua, and Tamaulipas. The conclusion of these testimonies is that the majority of the companies investigated in the report conduct pregnancy testing. Moreover, Human Rights Watch documented cases of maquiladora personnel forcing pregnant workers to work unpaid overtime, raising pregnant employees to more physically difficult work, and refusing to give pregnant women workers third or lighter work assignments, all in an effort to force them to resign. In view of the situation, we have to highlight that pregnancy testing violates Mexican federal labor law, which explicitly prohibits distinction among workers for such reasons as sex and ensures equality between women and men in the workplace. It also violates Mexican Constitution and international labor and human rights obligations. Nevertheless, according to what Dorothy Thomas, the director of the Human Rights Watch Women's Rights Project, even if sex discrimination is prohibited by Mexican and international human rights law, the US and other corporations openly practice sex discrimination, and the Mexican government allows the discrimination to flourish unchecked. Finally, it is important to have a global view of gender inequality in the labor field throughout Mexico. According to the World Economic Forum, the gender gap index in 2016 in Mexico was 0.7, considering 1 as the perfect equality between men and women. Nevertheless, even if this score may be high, when we look over the current labor situation in Mexico, we have to highlight the huge difference between genders. For instance, the percentage of young men who weren't employed or student account for 9% in 2016, while in the case of women it represented 31%. Furthermore, we find that even if women work more than men, the truth is that the proportion of unpaid work per day done by women is 62%, when in the case of men it accounted for 90%. In other words, the gender gap in the Mexican economy is a current problem which needs to be solved.